Well, this afternoon, I am joined by the National Coordinator, Media Reform and Coordinating Group, Dr. Francis Soa. Welcome to the podium.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to come back to Broadcasting House.
Indeed. You were once a very strong man in the building.
Thank you.
What progress has the MRCG made since 2018 when it began advocating for press freedom in the country?
We have made significant progress since the MRCG was established in 2015. And like you said, in 2018, we started producing the press freedom reports. The biggest progress has been the repeal of Part 5 of the Public Order Act of 1965. Basically, that single part in the Act created by then 3 separate offenses of seditious libel, criminal libel, and false publication. Now, in 2020, the government of Sierra Leone repealed the law. So in terms of progress, yes, we've seen the repeal of Part 5 of the Public Order Act of 1965. Aside the issue of the criminal and seditious libel laws, we have continued to produce reports that showed issues relating to safety and security of journalists. So like you pointed out in your intro, we have reports we have been doing for the National Endowment for Democracy in the United States, NED. We did a report with Media Foundation for West Africa on the safety and security of journalists. So to date, we now have historical records of a number of press freedom issues that occurred between 2018 to 2021, for which we think we've made progress by keeping track of those cases, doing advocacy programs on them, and we are seeing the results.
But even though the criminal and seditious libel has been expunged from our law books, there are still cases in court involving journalists. I mean, your organization recently drew the information minister's attention to some of these cases. Yeah. How far has that gone?
Again, that's another success story. For the first time, personally in my advocacy career, a letter was written to a minister that responded in less than 30 minutes. When we sent the letter to him, there was a positive response. The next thing that occurred, we received a copy of a letter which the Minister of Information addressed to the Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice for actions to be taken. That itself is a significant progress, which is why in our statement on the day on International Day to End Impunity against for crimes against journalists, we reminded technically the Minister of Information, but also the AG's office, because we know a copy of a correspondence was sent to them on that. So we believe that those matters that are still in court, there will be a speedy trial and conclusion. We commend the Sierra Leone police, because on their part, most of those cases they were investigating when the law was still there. They dropped them immediately the law was repealed. So we think we are making progress in our advocacy.
In your opinion, as an academic doctor, what fuels brutality and arrest of journalists in the country?
The greatest one is what we have addressed as a country, which was the existence of the criminal and seditious libel laws. Because when those offenses were criminalized, the police will come in contact with journalists. They will be arrested when there are allegations of criminal or seditious libel issues. So the singular act to repeal Part 5 significantly reduced potential arrest and detention. Now, what has happened now beyond the law, the ugly trend from the study we did on safety and security of journalists is that aside politicians generally, when journalists come in conflict with them, if you go to community radio stations, there are now several altercations between those who manage those radio stations and leaders in those communities, paramount chiefs, section chiefs, etc., etc. And there are also concerns from even ordinary members of society who may not like what journalists are doing. So these are some of the factors. So in terms of perpetrators in that report, if we are going to rank them, we have the SLP, we have the military, okay, and then down the scale we have the local and traditional leaders, ordinary citizens, etc., etc. So it's a mixed bag of several actors who performed those acts.
Even though you are advocating for the safety of journalists, I believe indeed that journalists themselves have, responsibility to safeguard, the manner in which they, carry out their work. Mm-hmm. So how can indeed, in good conscience, journalists ensure that they safeguard the manner in which they go about reporting?
You are perfectly correct. So one of the beautiful things in that report on safety and security was that the report also turned the searchlight to journalists themselves, to media owners, to media institutions, that they also have to ensure the safety and security of the members of staff, beginning with the very environment they work. How are they protected by their institutions? Beyond that, we also call for things around public education and training as to how they cover events. Say, for example, if you are covering a protest, okay, there are certain skills, there are certain techniques, there are certain pieces of knowledge you need to have to do those kinds of things. So yes, the safety issues we are talking about, they go beyond just the law, they go beyond just the government, they go beyond just the local authorities and the ordinary citizens to the media owners and particularly the journalists themselves, because we have always made the point that there is no story worth dying for. That as you go in search of the news, you have to be careful that you don't end up becoming the news.
Do you ever see, finally, as we round up, do you ever see a climate where journalists in the country will be totally free from censorship and brutality?
It's an aspiration. I'm always very optimistic. Like I argued in one of my latest articles, that it has been 1 year since the criminal and seditious libel laws were repealed, and the heavens did not fall. The heavens have not fallen. Okay, so it's the same. We cannot 100% guarantee the safety and security of journalists at all times, because even an ordinary argument between journalists and another person may result to some kind of confrontation. The point is, and I will end on this, the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists is not saying that we may not have potential clashes, we may not have potential attacks on journalists. The point that is being made is that the government, other authorities, the media institutions themselves should ensure the safety and security of journalists. So if there is an attack on journalists, the day is trying to tell us to remember the fact that if anybody attacks a journalist, the culture of impunity should not be allowed to thrive. That is to say, there should be justice if there is a possible attack on journalists. Although, like you asked the question, we hope that there will be no such attacks. But if they do occur, the government, the media fraternity, the law enforcement officers, nobody should encourage or support the culture of impunity.
On that final note, I thank you very much indeed. He's the National Coordinator, Media Reform Coordinating Group, Dr. Francis Son. The program you're watching is The Podium, and it's coming to you live on the national broadcaster, the SLBC.